I was gonna get going if you think, okay.
Yeah, we're still waiting on a few people, but
You want to give it a minute?
maybe another minute or two, and I think then it would work.
That's fine. I don't think we'll exhaust the entire time today.
Like most of our guests are on, they're going to be doing the presentation, so we may be able to get started.
Okay. Welcome everyone to today's meeting. I thank you all for joining us. Today we're gonna hear from different state departments. We all should have the agenda. The judicial branch, the Department of Corrections Parole, Board of Pardons, the Department of Corrections Ombudsman. We're gonna have Demas here today. Day Kimball, Nurturing Families, CHA, DPH, and then we will wrap up with some comments from Tracy and myself. So I move to start the meeting. Tracy, did you have anything before I call the first presenter?
Yeah, I think just one thing, we had asked everybody if you could provide in your presentation just an overview of the services that your um, staff provide in the community or that you contract for staff in the community. Just provide an overview and then look to some of the risk challenges that you face. And then we've had a suggestion from Kim Sandor from Connecticut Nurses Association. Great suggestion. Also, just spend a minute or so talking about the training that you may provide your staff in advance to try to mitigate risk in the community, if you would. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. So we'll get going. The first presenter will be the judicial branch and Ralph D'Agostine.
Hi, everybody. Just thanks to Judge Rogans as well for asking me to present for the judicial branch. My name is Ralph D'Agostine. I'm the Deputy Director for the Criminal Matters Unit within Superior Court Operations. And I just want to give a brief overview of how to look up a case in at the public judicial website. Is it okay if I share my screen? It is
Yes.
okay. 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 Let me just move this over here. Okay, so this is any member of the public can log on to the judicial branch website. It's www.jud.ct.gov. And when you enter that into the computer, you will come up to this menu.
We're not seeing it yet, Ralph.
Oh, you're not? That's interesting because it's, how about this?
Peter, do you know if
Let's see if this works.
oh, there we go. There we
We're
go.
good? Okay. Okay.
Yep, very
Okay,
good.
so this is the main menu of the jud.ct.gov website. And there's to the left, there's a host of items that you can choose. But what we want to do is we want to go to case lookup. This is interesting. It's not letting me. For whatever reason, it's not letting me click on case lookup. Okay, hold on one moment. I apologize. Okay. Okay. So Okay, so when you click on case lookup, you can look up by criminal cases, and you'll come to this menu. There's several different things you could look up. One, you could look up pending cases. So you can do that either by searching by defendant, and you could look it up through last name, first initial, birth year. And I know there was some questions about the fact that it's birth year and not full date of birth. When this initiative was rolled out, I believe it's well over 10 years now. The decision was made due to personal identifying information concerns. The decision was made to only allow the year of birth to be viewable on the public platform. So that's why you could only do a year of birth. And you could do, to kind of narrow it down, you can do a plus or minus date range. You could also do it by court location and what type of case. So criminal or motor vehicle. Let's go back here. That's for pending cases. And you could also search by a docket number as well if you have that. You can also look by daily docket, and that's the cases that are on for a particular day. So you would click on the daily docket, you would choose the court location, and when you choose the court location, it's going to bring up a list of cases on that day, except for arraignment cases. Arraignment cases are in same day arraignment cases. Those are defined in these situations as cases in which the defendant is incarcerated after the arrest and has to appear the next business day, or cases that involve a family violence arrest, which by law have to be arraigned the next business day. So you won't see that on the daily docket page. What I sense is many of you are interested in is the convictions. So you could search for convictions by defendant or docket number. And it's important to note that our computer systems are not offender-based. They're case-based. And that's, when I talk about limitations a little bit later, I'll go over that a little more in detail. But you could look up convictions by the defendant, and you would do it by last name, first name, birth year, again, court location if you choose, in the category type. I would say that there are some pretty significant limitations here. So after 10 years, for example, a conviction drops off the public website. It doesn't mean that it's no longer disclosable. It just means it drops off the public website. Non-conviction information, for example, that can be disclosable for a certain period of time. Things like a not guilty is disclosable for 20 days, for example. A nollie, which basically is declining a prosecution for a certain amount of time, that's disclosable for 13 months. Those will not be on the conviction page. Only convictions are on there. And when you go to this lookup, there will be those caveats in the bottom there, if you notice in the tan area. So one of the things we talk about a lot is record checks. I worked in the field for 15 years, and I would get a lot of requests for record checks from the public for various reasons, whether it was for immigration purposes, the military, just a member of the public wanting information on a particular person. What we explain to people is that we do not conduct record checks. Our computer records only go from approximately 2000 to the present. We refer them to the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. They have a link. I don't have the link handy with me, but there is we actually hand them something that we get from the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. It's available on their site, where you can request a record of an individual, the convictions. And they are the official keeper of that record, the conviction history. So if there are any questions that anybody has regarding the public lookup, I'd be happy to answer. If I don't have the answer for you, I'll be happy to find the answer for you. But that's just a brief synopsis. That's what's available online.
Thank you very much for that, Ralph.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ralph, thank you. This is Tracy. A question
Uh-huh.
regarding your thoughts on the record checks. If a public request is coming in and it goes over to DESSP, do you have any idea how long it would take to get that response? If
That I
put in a
do
request?
not know. That I do not know offhand. I don't believe, and I don't want to misrepresent. I don't believe it's instantaneous. So I don't know. I could follow up with our friends at DESPE and get that information to you.
Thank you.
Ralph, I have a question. So let's say we have all of these systems in place right now. Is there a department or a person who we could reach out to for live support, for information that may not be present on the actual website for now?
Yeah, I mean, you could always call the court of jurisdiction if you have a question. The main issue is we cannot state with certainty that that is all. If you said, "Hey, I want information on Ralph D'Agostino. Here's his date of birth," we can't say for certainty this is Ralph's complete record, because I might have something from the 80s, convictions from the 80s, or convictions from the 70s, and that's not going to show up on our database. So that's the issue you run into. If you did a record check with DESPP and you received docket cases with docket numbers, you can submit those to each. If say there's something out of Hartford Court, you could call the Hartford Court, provide them with the docket number, and they'll do further research for you, or contact the Superior Court Record Center. And if there's still a copy of the file and it has not been destroyed, because we do follow the practice book where a case is disclosable forever when there's a conviction, but the file itself actually gets physically destroyed after a certain amount of time. For example, if it's a felony, it gets physically destroyed 20 years after the conviction, or is the length of the sentence, whatever is longer. But we would still have information as long as it's not pre-2000. If it is pre-2000 and you have a docket number, it's a conviction, there are index cards, there are docket books, there are microfiche contained in those individual courthouses that they will research. I've had to do it plenty of times. They used to keep records by hand on typed index cards, and they would be able to provide certain information. Might take them a couple days, several days to get that information to you, because it does take a little bit of research, but you could go to the individual court of jurisdiction for that.
Okay. I have one more question, Ralph, probably two.
Yep.
What about minors? If someone is, at what point would their record not be visible to us? Is there a certain age?
Well, if a case is adjudicated either as a youthful offender, and ages have varied over the years. So depending on when the case was disposed, it's different ages. Right now, if you're over 18, you're not in juvenile court. If you're under 18, you're basic. That's a general statement. If it's a serious crime, it could be transferred to adult court. So there could be situations where there's a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old who has a conviction for a very serious crime, like a murder or a sexual assault. That would be public record. But if it's a general case and it's adjudicated either as a youthful offender or in juvenile court, you would not have access to those records. Those are non-disclosable.
Okay. And out of state, if someone is from out of state and happened to be in our state, would we have access to that, or?
We would, within our system, no. Within the Superior Court operations, the judicial branch, we only deal with Connecticut records. We would not be able to ascertain whether someone had convictions in another state.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Ralph? All right.
I had
So-
one.
Oh,
Yeah.
Chris.
This is
Yeah,
Chris
Chris.
Pankratz with Masters in Home Care. Are restraining orders and domestic violence in the judicial system?
Okay, so there's two different types of, and it's easily confused. There's protective orders and there's restraining orders. Protective orders are issued after, oftentimes after a domestic, there has to be an arrest. This is a good way to understand protective orders versus restraining orders. Protective orders are issued after arrest. They are terminated after the disposition of the case. However, a criminal case. However, after a criminal case, if there's a conviction, there might be a further order called a standing criminal protective order that could have a duration of 150 years expiration after a sentence. A restraining order is issued either in family or civil matters, and that's not something the criminal division handles. And you would, and just to further on the protective orders, which we handle, you would be able to get a redacted copy of a protective order However, it is heavily redacted. You would not know the name of the victim. We have to follow the statute 5486E. You would not know the name of the victim, the address of the victim. You would just, what you would know is the defendant's information and the what they have to abide by. So usually sometimes it could be what we call a no contact protective order, where you can't have any contact. And then there's a general, don't threaten, harass. That's a more general protective order.
Okay, thank you. And items regarding domestic violence, are those in the judicial system?
Yes, family violence cases are those arrests are disclosable.
Okay, thank you.
And
Kim,
how long does it take to get that information, Ralph, if it's, I know if we look it up on the judicial branch website and have the correct information down to birth year, we should be able to access it, correct?
Yes, you should be able to get the information that's available on that website, which will have the charge, the conviction date, the sentence. The sentence doesn't always involve jail time. There could be probation, or it could be an unconditional discharge or a conditional discharge. You will get that information is available on the website.
Okay. Sorry, Sas, I interrupted.
Oh, it's okay. Kim, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Ralph. I have a question. I'm sorry of my ignorance around these things. But I have two questions. The first is, when somebody is out on probation, for like maybe whatever reasons they're out on probation, are there any requirements on them to make any disclosures to people?
Well, there are, and you would not know from the website what the conditions of probation are. You would have to get a copy of the file, because they'll list conditions of probation. Anecdotally, have I seen that? No. Usually conditions of probation are, pay restitution, no new arrests, comply with some sort of treatment, things like that. Can it happen? Because you can make it pretty much anything a condition of probation, certainly. But in order to get to know what the conditions of probation are, you would have to get a copy of that, those orders from the file.
So I'm just thinking, as we listened last week and this week, I'm getting the feeling that so much about the environment is, you're not controlling the environment, right? And it's very difficult to control the people in the environment. So we're going to have to come up with a way that we can help we can do what we can do, but how do we help our workers that are entering the home be able to ask the questions and do what they need to do? So I was thinking, like, if it, could you say, just make it a thing, anybody who's on probation, they have to disclose that to, I don't know, somebody that they're living I don't know. I'm just thinking about, like, how can we flip it so it's like not everyone is looking up stuff and trying to find stuff, because it's like it's a rabbit hole going in 20,000 directions. So is there another way? Is there another route to mandate that?
Absent a statutory change or statutory requirement, I don't know. I work for the Superior Court Operations. That might be a question for the Court Support Services Division. That's better known as probation. They might be able to give a little more information or data, and I could certainly contact the director of CSSD to maybe answer some of your questions.
Thank you. Yep. And the other question I had is, when someone is released from, the system, are they on? So I'm thinking about electronic health records, communication of records. I'm thinking about Connie. I'm thinking about that space. Are they connected to a health insurance? Are they put on? Is there any health record that is transferable? I'm again trying to figure out, is the information being able to be marked or flagged or noted somewhere else that might be more easily accessible to folks?
From where I work, we wouldn't be able to flag. We record the orders of the court, so it's not something that we would we don't talk to the
Department.
insurance,
Yeah.
any databases like that, if that's the
Okay.
question.
Well, yeah, it might just be something we could ask Department of Corrections and their health services, kind of how when people are, transition back out to the community, what does that look like? I think we're all very, intentionally thinking about not creating new systemic and structural, conditions that, exacerbate things already, and trying to balance that somehow with safety and privacy. And when people have paid their dues, they paid their dues. You're not gonna, we don't
Sure.
want to penalize people for that. So really just trying to think outside of the box a little bit on that piece. So thank you for it,
Oh, no
entertaining
problem.
me with that.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to move on now to the Department of Corrections, Parole, and Community Services, Rihanna.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to thank Ralph again for his presentation. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Judge Grogans.
Thanks,
All right, take care.
Rihanna Gingras.
Good afternoon, everyone. Speaking on parole and what outreach looks like for us, similar to that of probation, probably there's conditions of release. And so our outreach is more formatted through our supervision and ensuring, as I said, compliance with conditions, as well as to support successful community reintegration. Just to go a step further on that, what that looks like for us would be things like home visits, employment checks, referrals and check-ins with treatment providers, local law enforcement, other support systems such as the residents that they're living in, and if there's any support systems in the residence, mother, father, family member of some sort. I think one of the last things that was mentioned right before we started was what types of training we might staff might be have experienced in order to reduce risk in the community while they're conducting their duties. And they go through an academy that include things like interpersonal communication skills, de-escalation skills. There is defensive tactics and things like that that they're required as part of their jobs. We also pair up when we go out to make it safer and going into the residences. We also have the ability of approving a residence before somebody goes to live there. So just ensuring that it does appear as though it's a safe environment. There doesn't appear to be any substance use in the home, weapons in the home. There's background checks being done on the people that are residing in the home with our supervised person. And wrapping that into home health care, there's not a requirement, just to kind of continue. And I don't want to step too far into the health services because that's a whole different, a different component of DOC. But when a referral is going out for home health care, as somebody had said, I think Ralph had said it earlier, or somebody who had asked the question on what's required and what information has to be shared or what is shared. And as we're talking on this work group, maybe it is something, if it is possible, to put policies in place to require certain things being disclosed. But we have a lot that is disclosed, but that's as a result of releases of information that are signed once the person is already out. There's some folks that may share, but to my knowledge, it's not required for certain things to be shared. So while some may share a criminal record or a sex offender registry or violent history, I don't know that that's standard. And that's something, of course, we can look into on what standard questions are answered and what information is provided. But it's not, to my knowledge, it's not shared on every single case, because I don't know that that's required at this time. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, Rihanna, it's Tracy. I do thank you very much for that information. You you talked about the training piece and you mentioned academy. Is it a standard training that state developed? We don't have anything for home health or hospice that's standard. These are all things that we, try to put together based on best practices and CDC, OSHA requirements, but we don't have anything standard. So I didn't know if you already have something developed.
So the department has a standard academy curriculum that they roll through, and I know the commissioner is on if he chooses to jump in. I don't want to speak out of turn, but there's a developed curriculum through the academy, and then there's certain additional things that have come on after the fact, such as de-escalation training. I know that several, and it's not required by the academy, but some of the additional training that we've sent certain staff to might be crisis intervention training. But the de-escalation training is something we've implemented statewide, agency-wide, and that's newer. And we signed on with a contractor who trained us, kind of did a T for T type of thing, and so we now train our staff. I do think that we've had numerous situations in the community, and I'm sure that's happened in the facility as well, where we've been able to avoid something escalating as a result of the staff's ability to be able to de-escalate and kind of diffuse a situation.
Thank you.
Rihanna, I have a couple of questions. My first question would be, when someone's being released and going into the community, do they receive mental health services or continued support? Where would they receive their mental health care?
Where would they receive it?
Yes, do they receive mental health services as they're transitioning into the community, and for how long?
So I can speak for parole. If somebody is receiving mental health treatment on the inside, before they're released, I see the commissioner just popped on. So Commissioner, please stop me if you'd like to speak. If somebody meets a threshold, is receiving mental health treatment on the inside, and they are now discharging to parole supervision, and as well, whether it's we've identified a need or they've identified a need before the person is released, and or the person has a requirement on their parole conditions, then we would make the referral. If they're dependent upon the level of their mental health needs, would require whether or not they're receiving specialized supervision by the mental health unit within parole. But that referral, if they are at a level where they're receiving supervision by the mental health unit, then the referrals are done prior to them leaving. They transition pretty smoothly. They are discharged with medication so that there isn't a lapse, and they would transition over to that treatment provider until the treatment provider deems they no longer require care. So if that we have people who remain on mental health programming and receive mental health care, whether it's medication management or whether it's clinical supervision, depending upon their needs, may receive it the entire time when they're on supervision.
Thank you. And my next question would be, how many individuals who get released would need to still go back home and care for, let's say, elderly parents or family members? So when they're released, if they are back in a home, providing care, right, to their loved ones who might now be elderly or children, how many?
I would say it's probably less than more. So in other words, the better way to explain it is, while I don't have a specific number for you, what I would say is that we don't release somebody to a home where it's their responsibility, being a returning citizen, to provide care for their loved one. When they are just being released from prison, we have to assess their needs. We have to assess that they're capable and they're stable and that they have what they need before they are taking care of someone else. And so while their parent may end up not being compromised when they get home, there's always the possibility that when they do return home, that a parent has, a stroke or has some kind of medical condition that has progressed to the point where they do become a caretaker. And then we assess it at the time. If they require home health care, then that's something that might be implemented at that time. But some of them end up going into homes, and they cannot care for their loved one any longer. And in some of those cases, they are not the sole provider. So there's a sibling or there's a spouse that's in the home taking care of that parent. Or they have perhaps a guardian conservator person that is saying, you know what, my brother just came home from prison and my mother is ill. I don't want him here while my mother is receiving care. And in that case, we would move the person, whether it's to a halfway house, whether we get them situated in their own apartment, but whatever the person who has accepted them into their home is comfortable with, and or who's speaking for them. So again, if there's an elderly parent or somebody had a medical episode, then there's usually somebody involved that would make that decision and say, I'm fine with them helping out, or I'm not comfortable with them being here any longer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Rihanna?
Yeah, Sasa, thank you. It's Tracy again. I had a situation, one of our home health members contacted me where they were giving care to a child in a home, and the mother and I think it was a sister, an aunt, who also lived in the home, had been in there giving care for a long time, and only because of news, not because of being able to look anything up on a judicial branch website, they had heard that a brother was out on bail after shooting somebody in, I don't remember if it was a relative but being involved in a shooting. And they only became aware of that because the brother was going to come live at the home. Is there anything, there's so many people on the call right now, I'm just trying to think, is there anything currently in place that we could try to clarify or support that actually happened? And, there's been no court date, well, a court date just for initial, but not a conviction. So is there any next step that we could do at that point to try to protect the child that we're caring for and the family?
So there was a lot there, so I want to make sure I'm understanding and I can address the concern correctly. So I can't speak on folks who come out on bail unless they are on supervision, parole supervision, and they were able to bond out. But if you're asking, if the question that you're asking is how can we better communicate so that the residents that they're going to, so I can respond to that and how we would handle it with parole. And that before we release somebody to a residence where there are people, they're not a self-sponsor, meaning they're not paying their own rent and living alone. If they are going to a residence and somebody else is paying the mortgage or the rent, so they're going to reside with somebody, they are made very well aware that the person is being supervised, that these are their conditions, that, for example, no weapons are allowed in the home. There's a series of questions that we go through before we place somebody in a residence. We go out and we meet with the person whose residence they're going to be living in, and make sure that we're clear about what conditions there are, that if at any point in time they are no longer comfortable with this person residing with them, that they don't have to keep them there. It doesn't mean they're going back to jail, but that we will happily move them prior to, like, we don't want them to be uncomfortable in their own home. So if they are not happy, if they are not comfortable with this person living there, we will find another location for them. We go through everything so that they know they're on supervision. These are their conditions. They can't have minors in the home, or they can't have contact with a co-defendant, all of the conditions. And then they can make the decision on whether they want that person there or not. So as far as what happens if they get rearrested and then they're coming back to the home on bond, again, if they are not comfortable with that person living there, then we would be able to relocate that person. But if they got rearrested, we might make contact with them and say, okay, this is what's going on. The person got rearrested. Are you still comfortable with them living in your home? And I don't know if that answers your question, Tracy. I know it was
does
a
to a
packed
degree.
question.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I worry about the child who's being cared for by a home health agency going in and not understanding or knowing the situation. And
Okay.
if, do you evaluate that at all? Do you evaluate who else is living in the home and if any other services are going into the home that might present a risk?
If we know about them, sure. So an example, we have approximately 20 people receiving home health care that are on supervision right now. And every person that I queried, they're in close communication with the VNA that's going into the home or the live-in aide. Some are receiving PT/OT in the home, and they speak with them, talk to them. Are they keeping their appointments? Are there any issues in the home? So they are communicating with those folks. So in that respect, I can say that yes, if we know there's somebody receiving services in the home. Again, I want to follow up with that. If it's not our supervised person receiving the care, we're limited. So if our person is going to reside in the home and the daughter or the child is receiving home health care, we're not at liberty we're not really going to be contacting them to say that. The person whose residence it is will obviously know, and it would be their duty to report. They would have to be the one to report because we're kind of bound by, we can't go that step further with regards to somebody else's care. We can control the care of our supervised person, but not somebody else in the home.
It is Commissioner Quiroz. Can I add a couple things?
Absolutely.
So, and Rihanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a larger group of individuals that are in for some serious charges that do end up bonding out, and they're not on parole, that the Department of Correction does not supervise. So if they're under parole and they're rearrested and they bond out, then we'll have supervision over them. But not every individual that bonds out in our 5 county jails are under parole community services supervision.
Correct. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So then our only way of knowing that would be just by looking on the judicial branch website for any prior history that only goes back 10 years. Is that correct?
So I'll defer to
I'm not
judicial.
sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand. Are you talking about when someone gets released on bail on a pending case?
Oh, I think what Commissioner Quiroz just said was even, much bigger picture. Somebody that had been in jail and released may not have the conditions of parole that Rihanna was speaking of. I think that's what he said. I'm sorry if I'm
Correct.
incorrect.
No, that's correct.
So we do have a large population in our county jails that are pending arrested and pending adjudication in the court system. They many times end up bonding out, and there is no parole supervision for us. So those individuals, once the paperwork is completed and approved and they bond out, they're not under the supervision of parole and community services.
So then those are the ones that I guess, Ralph, would those be, or because they're not
So from the web, there's a couple of things and a suggestion too. There's a couple of things that will end up displaying on the judicial branch website. However, we can only enter what we know. And although the practice book requires that a bond information be sent the next business day by the Department of Corrections, sometimes it takes a little while to get that bond information. We'll enter it as soon as we get it from the correctional facility, whether it's an email, whether it's a fax, or they send it interdepartmental mail. But my other suggestion would be, when you go look up a case in the judicial branch website, a pending case, not a conviction, but a pending case, you can select to be notified. It's called Savin, and there's a little sign up on the bottom. Anybody could sign up for this, and you get case updates. So when something like a bond out occurs, you would get notice to the email address. I believe they have some other options other than just the email as well. But you sign up for notifications on the case, and whenever there's a significant notification, you would be notified. It's not exactly real time, but there are batch updates throughout the day where our information feeds Savin and then gets that information to victims, any interested party. You'll get an update as long as it's a disclosable case.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yep,
Thank you.
I just would caution again one more time though that the issue with that is if somebody bonds out and it's at a correctional center, we do not know until we get notification from the correctional center. If the bond is posted at courthouse, which happens a lot, somebody will get arraigned and a bondsman comes to the window, that's entered real time. We enter it, it'll be in our system the same day. But if it's from a correctional center, it's not being entered the same day.
Thanks, Ralph.
Yep.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Next, we're going to go to the Board of Pardons and Paroles, David Bothwell.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm the attorney here at the Board of Pardons and Paroles, and just to give you sort of a quick but comprehensive overview of what the board does, we work in collaboration with Parole and Community Services. The Parole and Community Services, as Rihanna stated, they're the supervision agency, and they are hands-on with the individuals that get released onto parole. Here at the board, we don't do any supervision. Our job is to make the decisions as to who should go out on parole or whether someone should go out onto parole. So we are an executive branch agency. We are attached to the Department of Corrections for administrative purposes only. We're a criminal justice agency, but we work, while we're attached to DOC, we are an autonomous agency, and the board exercises independent decision-making over all their decisions to allow individuals to re-enter society. And the board is a very unique agency in that it's probably it is unique in just the amount of discretion that is vested in it by our enabling statutes. So the board has broad authority as to who should be released after serving whatever portion of their sentence. The board's mission is to facilitate the successful reintegration of suitable offenders into the community. We look to, number one, reduce recidivism, reduce victimization. The board is invested in crime prevention and promoting safe communities. And so those are, when the board is making decisions, those are the most prominent factors in the decision making. Obviously, community safety is number one. In making decisions, there's two sort of separate branches of what we do here at the board. One is clemency, and the other is parole. And I'll just touch on those sort of briefly about what those are. Clemency includes two different things. Clemency includes pardons. In the state of Connecticut, only the Board of Pardons and Paroles is authorized to grant anyone a pardon. The bulk of the pardon activity we do here is on primarily absolute pardons. Sometimes we do issue things called certificate of employability as well, which is less than a full pardon. And a certificate of employability is basically a certificate saying that an individual, while not being pardoned, really is suitable for certain types of employment. It helps people re-engage in the workforce. But most of the pardon that we issue here are absolute pardons, which basically expunge a person's record. Individuals who have criminal records, who have demonstrated a period, who have been demonstrated rehabilitation and a period of remaining in the community crime-free, contributing to the community, they can make an application to the Board of Pardons and Paroles for a pardon. We'll hold a hearing on those applications. The individual can make their case to the board, and if the board feels that they are suitable and deserving of a pardon, the board will issue that pardon, and as I said, it will erase that individual's criminal record. Now, just for time's sake, I'm not going to go. There are certain restrictions and requirements that the board requires in their application. But in terms of if someone comes before the board meeting the eligibility requirements and making the case, it is likely that that individual would receive a pardon. And I know that people have been talking about, being able to access records and things like that. Once that pardon has been issued, again, that record is expunged, and we work in collaboration with other state agencies in making sure that those records are erased. So if someone did have an incident in their past that may, would be of concern, if you know that, you would not be able to access that information once the pardon has been granted. Under our clemency aspect of the things we do is also, well, number one was pardons, but we also do what's called commutations. So the Board of Pardons and Paroles has the exclusive authority and jurisdiction to commute the sentence of any individual for any crime at all. Commutation is the substitution by the board of a lesser sentence than what the individual initially received. And again, that is an application process as well, where individuals who are currently incarcerated can apply to the board based on their record of rehabilitation, their correctional record, and ask the board to commute perhaps all or a portion of their sentence. The applicants must be serving a sentence of more than 10 years. They must have served a minimum of that sentence of 10 years as well. We exclude, because we have broad authority over the things we do here, we do exclude individuals who are serving sentences of life without the possibility of release. That's just an internal decision that was made by the board that we are not going to commute individuals who the courts have determined require a sentence of that severity. And in terms of granting a commutation of sentence, the applicant must clearly and articulate exceptional and compelling circumstances that would warrant the board granting a commutation. So those are the two aspects of what we do under clemency. The other core agency function we do here is parole. And parole, the board Parole is just the conditional release of an individual from imprisonment before their full sentence has been served. Parole eligibility in Connecticut, anyone serving a term of incarceration greater than 2 years and has completed their statutorily required amount of time served, whether that be, so we have 2 statutorily required amounts, whether that be if based on their crime, they would have to do 50% of their sentence or 85% of their sentence. And that's based on the severity of the crime. But individuals serving a sentence of more than 2 years who have completed their statutory amount of time are eligible for parole release. However, in the state of Connecticut, we bar individuals who have been convicted of capital felony, who have been convicted of murder, arson, murder, and aggravated sexual assault are ineligible for parole release. So that's the eligibility aspect of parole. Suitability is the second thing that we look at, and whether someone is suitable for parole is based on what the board is looking for. Number one, they look at the seriousness of the offense. They look at, number two is any victim input, how that crime has affected victims, the nature and extent of an individual's criminal history, performance on previous periods of parole or probation. We look at the institutional behavior of the individual while he's been incarcerated. We look at any treatment and educational programs that they've been participating in, and whether or not they have an established suitable release plan. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to live? Are they going to work? Those type of things. Where are they going to get treatment? And in releasing someone, the board also has the authority to impose conditions on them. We impose 6 standard conditions on all parolees and anybody going out on special parole as well. They sign a parole agreement where they agree to those standard conditions of parole. They will not be released unless they sign the document on agreeing to the standard conditions of parole. The board, based on the individual, may also impose additional or special conditions tailored to the specific criminogenic needs or risks of the individual. So that can be substance abuse treatment, that can be problem sexual behavior treatment, things of that nature. Those conditions, though, based on how an offender responds, they can be added, they can be removed during the period of parole. And then probably our last function is that while parole and community services is supervising the individuals on parole, if they believe that those individuals have violated their parole in any way, those individuals are sent back to the board to determine whether or not their parole should be revoked. And we have we hold due process hearings for all individuals who have been brought back. It's called a revocation hearing. And we have hearing officers that are here in-house, parole officers that act as hearing officers to determine whether or not an individual has violated their conditions and is in need of further incarceration. So I know it's quick. I was trying to do it. I don't want to, I could go on for hours and hours on a lot of these things. And it's a lot more comprehensive than I just stated. I'm sure you're going to have some questions, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. That's what we do here. We release individuals based into the community based on, risk assessment. We balance rehabilitation with risk. And all the board members are trained, and it's an extensive training process, and we hold continued training once a month for all board members. So it's a difficult job, and there are no guarantees, but I think the board does an excellent job. And I'm sorry, in terms of, how we interact, I don't think we don't interact, as I said, the interaction with members of the community is more in the hands of parole and community services because we're just making the decisions on release here. Okay, and once we release them, they're in the hands of parole and community services. So we don't have any direct interaction unless there's victim input that is brought to the board. And as I stated, victim input is one of the core decision-making factors that the board takes into account. So that's just a quick overview. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks, David.
Sure.
I have a question.
Sure.
As far as people on parole, right? They're the ones that's still connected or they're transitioning out of incarceration. What resources are available for those individuals if they needed end of life compassionate care? So for people who are sent home, how do we get them connected to services? How does that happen? Is that something you would work with?
Now, you're talking about individuals who are incarcerated, who are ill and are released back into the community?
Correct, but they might
Right.
need end of life care. They might need hospice. So
Right.
they may, yeah.
So we have, and I probably should have included this, but for the sake of time, I didn't. But I can tell you that under our parole authority, the board has the parole to release individuals under what we call medical and/or compassionate parole. Okay, so medical parole is our statutory release mechanism for individuals with terminal illnesses who are so debilitated or incapacitated by such condition, disease, or syndrome as to be physically incapable of presenting a danger to society. So the board has the discretion to release those individuals as long as their sentence is eligible. They can release those individuals, and under compassionate parole, it's a little bit different. So compassionate parole, medical parole is for those individuals suffering terminal illnesses. Compassionate parole is the statutory release mechanism for individuals who we just determined to be so physically or mentally debilitated, incapacitated, or infirm as to be physically incapable of presenting a danger to society. So the only difference in the two is that one of those illnesses is terminal, whereas the other is they're just reached due to age or to health condition, whatever. They're just incapable of presenting a danger. Those applications for that type of release normally come from medical staff at the Department of Corrections, and they're accompanied by a medical report that the board reviews, and we do hold a hearing on those matters as well to determine whether or not these individuals are suitable for release. And when they are released, I think Rihanna may be able to speak more to this or Claire, but we release them usually to skilled nursing facilities. If anything changes while they are in those facilities, there is the potential that the individual could be returned to incarceration. In fact, I haven't seen it much, but I have seen one individual who was released on, I believe it was compassionate parole. It wasn't a medical situation. It was a terminal situation, but released on compassionate parole because he was really, his condition of being so physically incapacitated had been resolved. So we did return him to incarceration. But in terms of any other treatment options, I'd have to defer to Rihanna because once they're out in the community, again, we don't supervise them.
You're muted. I'm not sure if that was to me or not.
Thank you, David. Rihanna, thank you.
So just to make sure I'm answering the question, would you please ask it again, Sasa?
Sure. When someone is sent home and they require compassionate care or end of life care, what's the process? So David touched on this a little bit. I guess my question would be if someone went to a nursing home, right?
Mhm.
Because they seem severely incapacitated, either mentally or physically. And at some point, can they be discharged from that nursing home to home health, or if they needed hospice, would the hospice team go in? How would we, how does that normally happen, that connection to end of life or compassionate care?
So it can happen from the facility, as David mentioned, and I'll touch on that. Again, healthcare, health services is not here. However, they would make a referral for home health care or hospice, depending upon the person's living arrangement. So if they have a place to go to, then they would file, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Ascend process, making sure that they meet level of care. And that their medical needs require certain services to be put in place. They would be discharged home potentially with services in place, whether it's hospice, et cetera, or they would be referred, if they meet that level of care, to a nursing home. Nursing home would either have hospice come into the nursing home, depending upon the potentially the home that they're in or the services that are provided there. If the person would then be able to discharge home, as in they have a caretaker, a place to go, then they would do certain checks, I guess, to make sure that they can go home with the medical needs that they have, that the home is suitable, go out and make sure it's a safe environment, and then they would discharge the person home. We do see, and we have had folks who are on supervision released to a nursing home. And to David's point, if they do not have that restriction, meaning that they are not stipulated to only reside at a nursing home, and they can be discharged to the community, then those services would be referred out, and then the nursing home would follow the process to have that person aligned with services, and we would then pick up from there. And instead of going into the nursing home to check on the supervised person, we would then go into the home with home health care or hospice, whoever is aligned for services, and we would go and interact with them in the home.
Thank you, Rihanna. Jen, you had a question?
Hi, yes. This is Jen LeDuc with Day Kimball Healthcare at Home. So just a quick question, just more out of my own curiosity. And on the board, what is the board composition? Are there community members on that board? Or I'm just curious who comprises the board.
Yeah, so the board members are, we are an executive branch agency. The board members are all appointed by the governor, and we are statutorily allowed 10 full-time members of the board. We can also have 5 part-time members of the board. And they're pretty diverse. Currently we have a former school teacher. We have, I believe, 2 former social workers. The chair of the board is currently a former social worker who worked at the Department of Children and Families. We have a former police officer. A college educator. So it's a diverse group, all appointed from, by the governor from the community. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions for David? I saw Kim. Go ahead, Kim.
I guess it's just a general question for David, Rihanna, or Ralph. From your position, thinking about kind of, what we're all contemplating, home care, worker safety, as it may be from a visitor, a relative, as the patient themselves, whatever it may be. is there anything that comes to mind that you would think would support home care worker safety, whether it's some training you give on your end that's been successful in your agencies when people are going to the home, or if it's, does the board need, knowledge and education about, the risks to people going into the home and that this is an issue and that it should just be something in their awareness? Or, do you have any thoughts on helping us go towards strategies and solutions that may support our mission here?
I would say, in terms of, I think one thing that I think is probably should be brought up here is that I think you should all have the ability to gain information about some of the, the individuals who you are going to be providing care to. I think, though, there's a lot of mechanisms really that have sort of potentially block your ability to do that. And so I'm not sure what the answer is. So one of the things I was thinking about as I was talking to you about pardons is, the pardon process here erases an individual's criminal record. So if you were interested in searching it out and that individual had been pardoned, you wouldn't be able to find that out. There's also something that probably should be considered too, is that the new clean slate law that was enacted a few years ago here in Connecticut, which is the process mechanism for individuals having their records erased automatically, so that they don't even have to apply to the board in order to see their convictions or their criminal record expunged. That certain convictions just automatically drop off their record. So I don't know what the answer is in terms of really getting a comprehensive look at that individuals. I think there's also one of the other issues I think about is that there's also constitutional issues in terms of, one of the things that the board has recently we've had to change a lot of our conditions based on recent case law, specifically in the areas of sexual offender conditions, that we really had to streamline our condition for problem sexual behavior based on case law that said, particularly with regard to access to the internet and social media, in terms of whether or not that's a First Amendment violation. So we've had to change our practices there. It's a difficult, I don't know what the answer is in terms of trying to get everybody, the information on individuals that potentially have a criminal history, and whether or not you feel obviously safety is an issue. And I believe you should have some sort of a mechanism to be able to access to sort of find out some of the history, but there are a lot of things in place now that sort of prevent that. So it's a concern.
Well, I just want to be clear that, I don't think any of us thinks that anybody who was, everybody's a threat out there. It's obviously if someone's done their time and they're going out on parole, there's a feeling that, people are going to go down that path, hopefully, and that's the system. So it's kind of like just trying to think about, what might just raise the red flag about something that was a little bit more worrisome. Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I know it's what we're all sitting here wondering in general. And we know that safety goes well beyond the judicial system and corrections and everything else as well. So don't want to think we're just being narrowly focused on that.
Thanks, Kim. Rihanna?
Just to, I think, speak more on David's point, but also just to respond, you're asking if there's things that that have worked or that we think might be helpful. And I I think back to the releases that are signed so that we can share certain information more comfortably, that we can provide it without causing issue. Perhaps again, like somebody had suggested, with putting certain questions into policy so that people have the knowledge before they're going into the homes. I do know also that with that knowledge sometimes causes folks to be nervous because perhaps they don't have all of the background information. I do know that with the communication we've had with the healthcare services that are in place on supervised persons currently, it's I think it's come a long way. And I think that there is good, effective communication. If there's non-compliance, if there was any disrespect, anything to that degree, there would be kind of a uniform unified, like an approach that would show support on both sides of things. The other thing is perhaps, and I'm sure this has probably been thought of already, but any kind of support for those that are going into the home, such as, and maybe this is being done already, to check in when they're heading to whatever addresses, checking in when they're getting out so that people know where they are. We have had, and not in with home health care, but in situations, especially right after the incident in Willimantic, we have case managers that might go into the homes, and they were concerned over going in by themselves. They had asked if there would be team visits able to be done. And so, when possible, we were able to support in that manner. But so those are just a few suggestions. I know there's going to be no easy fix for this, and but I do think that the releases of information, the communication on both sides of things definitely helps, and the awareness of when staff are going into the homes and when they get out. I don't know if that would help with comfort level. Thank you.
Thanks, Rihanna. Eric, you had a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that. David or Rihanna, I'm not so sure who to address this to. Innately, though, you're not releasing people that you deem unsafe to the community. You're not recommending parole but so eventually, I mean, actually, we're kind of, I think as healthcare providers, we're painting everybody with the same brush because we don't have any details of the things that you are using to make your judgments about whether this person is safe or not to return to any kind of community, whether it's whether it's on parole or element. So I'm just curious, those elements of information, can you discuss the elements of information that you consider? Because we're all sitting in a situation where we're going to see these patients, but we have to risk stratify them. And we know that we're making our own judgments individually at every different agency across Connecticut and every different service. Who's the highest risk that we have to do these joint visits on, or who's really not a risk? Help us understand how you look at that risk stratification, and knowing what you know is public to us, guide us for that risk stratification problem that we're wrestling with.
Well, I guess, to start off, what the board uses and what, the decision, what happens first is, so when someone is parole eligibility date is coming, approximately 6 months before that parole eligibility date, one of the parole officers goes to the facility. We start the interview process and start the process for parole. And one of the things that is gathered is what's called, and I think Rihanna can speak a lot better to what this is than I can, because my role here is, I'm not a parole officer, I'm the attorney here, but we use what's called SCORES. It's the Statewide Collaborative Offender Risk Assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And Rihanna, are you able to speak to what exactly goes into, coming up with those score numbers?
Sorry, I'm in my my mobile office here, so trying to press all the buttons on the cell phone doesn't help. I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah, so the risk assessment looks at things such as criminal history, violence, what kind of support systems they have in place, such as, family, friends. Are they employed? Do they have history of employment? What does their education look like? Is there mental health components or concerns, substance use, things of that nature? And so we would look at that, perhaps depending upon the person and what their length, their period of confinement would look like. If it was not a board jurisdiction case, then we would look at other risk assessments that look at those same areas. Is there domestic violence? I know I mentioned the family and friends, so that looks at both supports and risk factors that would, and then in total, it looks at it develops from there a score, and that's how we gauge supervision.
And I so appreciate that there's something like that. I mean, I was imagining you'd had to have a way to look at, all the different factors, and that's probably a valid tool after a while that you use probably nationally. Can we see that? Will that be public information that we could consider?
Go ahead, David.
I'm sorry, you could probably make I think you would have to make a Freedom of Information request in order to obtain that. What I'll say is all our hearings, we provide a video feed to, so you can go on our website every day. We hold hearings here every day. You can go on our website and just, click on whatever hearing you want. So we hold hearings at multiple facilities a day. We hold multiple types of hearings each day. But in terms of getting those documents, I think you would have to make that request through Freedom of Information. I think what I'll also tell you is too, in terms of, not only scores, but what the board does, as I said to you, that we start preparing for a parole hearing 6 months prior to an individual's parole eligibility date. And what we gather then is all the police reports relevant to any crimes that the individual is currently incarcerated for. We get any sentencing transcripts from the court. We get trial transcripts if the individual had actually decided or went to a trial. We get pre-sentence investigations reports prepared by the probation office before an individual is sentenced. And we get all the documentation from the Department of Corrections, including, disciplinary report history, what they have been doing and treatment history. What have they been doing during their period of incarceration? And the hearing is, it's pretty comprehensive. So the individual will come. They're not allowed counsel at these hearings because the board wants to hear directly from them. What's their plan? What's their treatment? What's their rehabilitation been? So the individuals themselves present to the board. The board has a questioning period where they really sort of dive into to the crimes, to the individual's history, treatment, whether substance abuse, if it's sex crimes, what type of treatment they've been receiving while they've been incarcerated, and what's the plan going forward. I hope that answered your question, that, we certainly do our due diligence in gathering all the information we need before the board makes a decision. And the board does the same during the hearings. I will tell you though, it's like, I'm here every day. I watch them every day. There are no guarantees. Right? So the board is trained. We use what's called a structured decision-making plan that was developed at the University of Cincinnati, and the board is trained in that. And again, they receive monthly trainings. So I think the board is good at what they do, but again, there are just no guarantees,
I listen, I totally respect that. And if we get it right 100% of the time, then we don't have any worker safety problems with, right? So, I mean, that's the yin and the yang here. And and that's not going to, I mean, listen, people are people. I'm not saying you could get it right for 6 months. And then, I mean, I just appreciate hearing about the tools. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, David. Tracy, you.
Yeah, I just based on what Eric was just asking and the responses, I guess the question is, I know David, you said we could FOI the information, but I think we're looking for some type of a tool that we might be able to use in practice. And if you are using the scores tool, I think is what you called it, scores assessment, is that something that we could at least get the results of? And is that a tool that might help us? We don't, as I mentioned, we don't have any type of a standard risk assessment tool where, Hartford has a scale of 1 to 5 and Harriet Home Health has a scale of, 1 to 3. It's not the same. It's like we need something that can be common. And there is no standard across the country for such a tool for home health. So I think that's really what we're wondering. Do you in the corrections system have a tool to determine risk? And is it something that is at all transferable, objective versus, I know it's got to be somewhat subjective, just as Eric said, people are people, but is it something that we might be able to use in some way?
Well, I think it would be, certainly from my point of view as the attorney here, and I would think it would be definitely something that would be helpful to you to have. Now, whether or not, the trick is in getting that, I think, that would be a question posed to the department, directly to the Department of Corrections, as to whether or not, you could get materials as to what goes into, developing, the scores numbers. I just don't, I don't know. I agree with you 100% though, that, and again, this is why I was saying before, I just don't know what the answer is, but you should have some ability, to, access, some sort of database to find out just general information at the very least, about, individuals you may be dealing with. As I said, it's, I am an attorney, so I know the, the legal, range that are, put on us. And, I do my best when people call me, my numbers there, I'm sort of the public information officer here as well. I hold a few different roles here. But and my direct number line is on the website, and people call me all the time asking me questions, and I try to do my best to divulge to people everything that I can within legal limits, to try to give them a better idea. But
I think, with what Rihanna said, goes into that assessment. Almost every single thing that she mentioned is part of our new law, that we're required to obtain that information. Not easy information for us to obtain at all, but it's all, the criminal history, the violence, the support system, mental health issues, substance abuse, sexual assault history. All those pieces are things that we're now required to obtain, and it's pretty difficult for us to obtain when we need to see those patients today and not, 4 or 5 days from now. So
yeah, again, I
that's
mean,
where we need to try to brainstorm what we can do to make that happen a lot easier or have it be a lot more accessible.
yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of, this group here, I would like to see in the end that there be some solution to that. I would say to you, in the meantime, like I said, I try to do my best to inform the public. I know, this is an agency where there's obviously people have concerns, about some of the decisions that we make here. So I field a lot of calls. And I try to do my best to give people the information they need that may sort of hopefully ease those concerns. So I would say to you that in the meantime, if there was something that is very concerning to you, that probably just, call me up and I'll see if I can help you in any way.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
And turn it over to Rihanna, who had a question or a comment. Go ahead, Rihanna.
I was just going to kind of piggyback off of David and saying that the assessment that we utilize is a risk and needs assessment. It is used in our case to more or less guide supervision to determine what programs, if any, that they need. And it sounds as though, while that some of that may be the type of information you're looking for, I'm wondering if perhaps there might be more of a violent risk assessment or something to that effect that might be more applicable for what you're looking for. And I don't know what that looks like or if one exists, but the use for us is more to guide housing and treatment referrals and things of that nature, and to determine how many times a week we might need to see them to ensure that they are getting a job and have the housing and are going to treatment, things of that nature. Are they making, you know, good choices, good decisions? And so I don't know if it would address every single need. And I'm wondering if there's a different one that would more target like a violence, and whether that's domestic violence because it's violence in the home or something to that effect. But I will certainly, you know, ask around, see if there is something along those lines that might be helpful.
Thanks, Rihanna. I wanted to, this is a good time, actually. Our next group would be Demas. Devon's going to need a little more time. He's in a meeting. So I wanted to head next to Julianne Gerard. Then after her will be Intercommunity, and then Mobile Crisis. So Julianne.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Julianne Giard, Section Chief for Community Services at Demas, and I'm just going to give an overview. Demas, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, is an executive branch agency, and it provides and funds statewide services, mental health and substance use services for adults. We do have some prevention services that are lifespan, but for the most part, all of our treatment services are for adults. And it's delivered, as I said, by state operated programs and contracted private nonprofit agencies. There's approximately 7 different types of programs overall that are community-based, some of which are in people's homes, not all of them. There's a variety of community settings where these services could be provided. And again, some are in the home, or staff are transporting clients between places. So Mobile Crisis, which you're going to hear more about from Sarah, has the most, if we look at our FY24 data across all Demas services, the community-based level of care with the most people served is Mobile Crisis. And so that's a service that's available 24/7 to any Connecticut resident who calls, or someone calls on their behalf, who's in some kind of mental health distress. It could also include substance use. Outreach and engagement, we have a variety of those programs. That's the second most common. Community support program is another statewide program that includes case management services, skill building services, peer support services, employment and education services. This is helping people with mental health and or substance use disorders obtain and retain employment. Supportive housing services, case management, and assertive community treatment, which I think you're going to hear more about as well. So taken all together in FY24, these community-based programs at Demas served about 30,000 individuals. Demas on an annual basis serves approximately 100,000 individuals. So a good third are in the community-based settings, some of which are in people's homes. And these services are across 100 different providers, some of which Demas operates. So just to give a sense of the scope and volume of these community-based services. I'm going to turn it over now to Tyler Booth at Intercommunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hopefully just share this single PowerPoint for you all, but just to give you some color commentary around what Julian already talked about. So Intercommunity is one of those providers. We provided 34,000 community-based services last year. They range in levels of acuity from kind of low need to high need. And that includes the mobile crisis 24/7 appointment services and other things that Julian talked about. I've been tasked with talking about one of those levels of severity, which is when you go to the bottom of the slide, it looks at case management. And there are a variety of different programs that help people either just on a walk-in basis where they might get support once a month or even only once a quarter or so, all the way to up to 7 times a week. And those services are provided kind of across the Connecticut area in grocery stores and clients' homes, specialty care, wherever it is that they might need. The ACT level is a team model, and that is for the acuity level of needing to be seen 2 or 3 times per week to avoid needing to be hospitalized. So that is a team of prescriber, RN, therapists, case managers, peers that go out into the community. For us, it's 8 staff that we serve 30 individuals for, and we're there 2 to 3 times a week, everywhere from supporting with self-administration of medication to activities of daily living to budgeting to whatever else it may be. And on all the services that are listed here, we usually go out just as a single individual, with the exception of being the mobile crisis, where it's usually a peer and a clinician that go out. So I try to keep it quick. I can turn over to Sarah for more information on the 24/7 mobile crisis, and can certainly answer any questions at any point.
Sure. Sarah? Sarah, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'll start again. Sarah Gadsby, CEO for River Valley Services. As Julian indicated, we are a local mental health authority under the umbrella of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Under River Valley Services, we have a mobile response team, which operates 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We have staff that are able to provide outreach into the community on all 3 shifts. We currently provide services to Middlesex County, Lyme, and Old Lyme, which makes up about 18 surrounding towns. Our mobile response team provides evaluations to individuals experiencing psychiatric crisis in the community. They outreach to individuals' homes, shelters, residential programs, nursing homes, soup kitchens, really anywhere the person is experiencing a crisis. Calls for support usually come directly to our mobile response line, at which time the mobile clinician will complete a brief phone screening to determine the need and appropriate response. Regarding safety in the community, if the person is already in services with River Valley Services, the mobile response clinician will be able to access some of the most updated risk screens and assessments that may have been done by their assigned team they're in treatment with. Upon intake and at assigned times in treatment, we assess for suicide risk, substance use, weapons in the home, access to weapons, risk of victimization and exploitation, which unfortunately is quite high for the population that we serve. We do have some type of risk screens that we do in regards to mental health, and we look at other factors such as the environment that they're living in, medical risk factors, and situational awareness, how they're doing in the home that they're residing. But a lot of the times, our mobile staff will get calls from the community to help from a family member, and or different providers, and we will not have access to any of these types of assessments. Mobile will do as much as they possibly can to obtain information, again, through a brief screening tool, and then make clinical informed decisions on how to proceed. Often staff will go out in twos to mitigate risk. However, staff will go out individually if they're visiting like a residential program because there's residential staff already available. At times, mobile will also get called from one of the surrounding police departments requesting support and evaluation. This would also be another time in which staff would go independently because the police have already kind of secured the scene for safety. Other ways that we look to mitigate risk in mobile and for all of our outpatient teams, because just like the ACT team, we have a lot of our community teams going out into people's homes, that we have all of our staff are trained on risk assessment when they're hired and then annually. And you don't have to be a licensed clinician in order to complete some of these screening tools. For example, the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, which is an evidence-based tool, can be used by anyone to identify risk and ultimately prevent suicide. Upon hire and then annually, all staff are trained in collaborative safety strategies. This training reviews best practices in the prevention and management of dangerous behavior. Includes how to avoid and or escape dangerous situations and using a variety of preventative strategies and self-protective physical skills should an assault occur. As a local mental health authority, we often treat what would be considered high-risk clients. So we have internal systems in place to review and mitigate potential risk. Some of those strategies would include reviewing high-risk clients during morning meetings prior to going out in the community. All of our outpatient teams have morning meetings. The teams are multidisciplinary. Everybody comes to the table and talks about clients that may be struggling and kind of what measures can we put into place to be able to support the client and the staff going out. Some of the other strategies would include we have a mobile response alert form. When we have an individual that's not doing well, we can put in a mobile alert, which would give the mobile team clinical information about on somebody who's struggling. And it can be our internal team at River Valley Services, but it's also available for our contracted DEMUS providers if they're also maybe struggling with somebody in their residential program. We also have weekly risk meetings in which that meeting is co-facilitated by a medical director and clinical director, just to really take a larger look at the case, current treatment being provided, and are there any other avenues of supporting the person moving forward in their treatment. And mostly this could be really the risk is self-harm, or the risk could be substance use, or there could be multiple different reasons that we would have these risk meetings. And then just lastly, because that really, at the end of the day, we cannot mitigate all risk, but always kind of support our staff that if anything feels unsafe, that they shouldn't enter that situation. And we would support that, and people can come back to the table and we can talk about next steps in which to provide support to that individual in our care. Any questions?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Any questions?
Yeah, Sasa, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the population. So this is 24/7. Is this is anybody can call in, or this is a population that you already serve? So this is Medicaid only. This is all population.
Statewide, all people. Yep.
That's okay. That's what I thought. So I'm thinking of some cases that we would care for in the community, and sometimes we have family caregivers who are at very high risk for mental health concerns. Even, I mean, I guess terrible example to have to bring forward, but the example of the homicide and murder and suicide at the nursing home in Cromwell a month ago or whenever that was. You know, there are situations like that at home too, when we have caregivers who are completely burnt out and at their wits' end, and you know, what do they do? So, are you seeing anything like that on your calls? Because those are cases that may not be, we could try to assess, but we may not be fully aware. And how would we communicate, or how would we hopefully engage in a communication with mobile crisis, or could we, or is that something that wouldn't be?
Absolutely. In fact, we have some of our visiting nurses here in our area that do utilize mobile crisis and call mobile crisis. They tend to really work because they could probably already be involved in our service delivery. They would work with the team that they're connected with. But at any time, we're here to service the community. So we often get calls from family members that somebody is just not doing well and they're really concerned about their mental health and well-being. And those are the types of calls that we respond to. They do not have to be connected with our services, but we do support adults, not children. There's a difference, mobile response services for children.
So if someone did call you, a family member called you, would you be screening that family member at all to see if there were other services in the home if you were not aware that there wasn't, you know, hospice or home health on the case?
We would. It depends on the situation of why they're calling. We would really try to ascertain any and all information that the family member would provide us, and then really from there kind of strategize if there is risk issues that we need to be taken into consideration.
Okay.
Thank you. Sarah, I have a question. What's the average response time for mobile crisis? And a second part to that would be, what barriers would your team face when you might not be able to find the person that, let's say, the visitor nurse called about? What would be the barriers? Thank you.
So, Julene, what is the state average? Are you able to speak to the state average for response times?
So we really are doing well with the benchmark of under 90 minutes.
Barriers, which may include why it could be up to 90 minutes, is that, you know, we service between Middlesex County, Lyme and Old Lyme. It could take us at least 30 minutes to get down, and then some down to Lower County. We may end up, it could also be that we would have mobile response team could be out already doing another call, and they have to finish up that one before they can then respond to the next one.
Thank you. And Tyler, I have a question for you. Is it a ratio of 8 to 30 that your team is servicing, or is it only 30 people that your team is currently able to provide services for?
Sure. At this point, ACT level of care is a grant-funded program, and so there's like Intercommunities grant is to serve 30 people at any given point of time, and it happens to take about 8 people to do that based on the 3 times a day or 3 times per week contact.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Next, we have Day Kimball, Deanne, Sandra, and Deanne.
I'm just a little concerned about timing here, Sasa. I don't think we're going to get through everything today. Because it's almost 4:15.
So
yeah,
I think
so maybe do these, and then we're going to have to put off the others till the next time.
Yeah, I agree, Tracy. So Sandra and Deanna.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. Oh, Deanna, would you like to go first, or would you like me?
If you don't mind, only because I have to scoot and get my kids.
Sure. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll keep this quick. So my role here at the hospital is the Director of Laboratory Services, and one of the services that we provide through our phlebotomy team is the home draw service. So when a doctor prescribes a requisition that says, please draw this patient weekly for this amount of time, or please just go and collect this this set of blood tubes for these tests just this one time. It doesn't really matter what the cadence is. We will perform those draw services and coordinate with the patient based on the due dates that we are provided. We also do service nursing homes, and we do have offsite locations, which some of these things that we're talking about, my staff have encountered even with patients coming to us because we don't have security measurements in place at the hospital or at the offsite that, you know, I would feel comfortable with, because sometimes our patients, as you know, can be a little bit volatile at times if they are not getting what they need. So some of the things that my staff have encountered when going into homes, and, you know, to be completely transparent with you, they did not really start coming forward until I probed them with questions and inquiry about what they're experiencing. And I really wanted to thank Jen for actually, you know, bringing this topic up and including us in this conversation, because yes, there are a lot of things that home healthcare workers will experience. And from the phlebotomy perspective, they're in the home maybe 10, 15 minutes and they're still experiencing these types of behaviors. So some of the things that they have experienced are open drug use from other, I guess, people that are in the home. Maybe they are caretakers of the individual. Some people didn't recognize what that paraphernalia may look like, or they didn't recognize that maybe what they were utilizing wasn't for medication purposes. So they started coming forward and telling me about those types of issues. Some of the phlebotomists have also described weapons that have been on bedside tables, or maybe on like a nightstand or some sort of a table that is in their living room. A lot of times they are just knives that will, I guess, the folding knives that people often carry with them, but also guns. There have been a number of times that an instance of a gun has been present. They don't know if they're loaded or not, of course, but people have had them out in the open. A couple of my staff have been grabbed in inappropriate areas on their bodies. They have also been grabbed just by the arm and then pulled back, with inappropriate comments being made to them. A lot of them are female. We only have one male phlebotomist on our staff. So a lot of them are also young. And the people that they encounter when that happens, sometimes they're able to just kind of laugh it off and ease the moment and say, oh, you're silly, you know, why would you do that? Or, you know, and they try to leave as quickly as possible, but they have been physically grabbed by some of the patients. Other instances include exposing genitalia to my staff. That can be a little bit uncomfortable, but also we are dealing with some patients who are quite elderly and have dementia, so they are unaware that they are even doing things like that. So I did want to mention it, but most of those encounters have been very, very innocent, and the patient was really not capable of understanding that that would be inappropriate. And then just general rudeness. If a patient is describing to my phlebotomist, hey, you know, my doctor told me I wasn't due for this blood draw until next week. Why are you here? Get the hell out of my house. You know, basically stating to my staff, you know, you're wrong, I'm right, and I'm calling my doctor and complaining. I think it's more of a miscommunication and or coordination, miscommunication of the coordination of that draw. So anytime that is something that is expressed, I have my phlebotomy lead reach out to the doctor and then verify the dates that they said it was due. If the patient flat out refuses, we'll just let the doctor know the patient has refused and maybe you should talk to them so that we can go back and perform the service. I'm sure there are other instances, but these are the major ones that I jotted down, and I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you. Sandra, did you?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Sandra Asanowitz. I'm an outreach and engagement coordinator, group facilitator for nurturing families under Day Kimball Healthcare. We serve Windham County with home visiting that is free and voluntary. We're funded by the Office of Early Childhood, and our home visiting is offered to families prenatally and with children 0 through 5 years old. So we offer home visiting. If they decline home visiting, then mail and telephone support. We have play groups, parent support squad walks, and Circle of Security groups. I wanted to touch though on the examples of the work safety challenges. They're mostly to when our home visitors have to mandate report out what they're seeing. In one of the instances, our home visitor had her car keyed when she called the police for a wellness check. And she noticed that after they did the wellness check and she went back to her home visiting and resumed it, say the weeks later, her car was keyed during the visit, and then she stopped and stopped visiting that family. Our bilingual home visitor serves Willimantic heavily with the Guatemalan undocumented families. She's experienced the male lead and dominance that the females fear. And Teresa has, our bilingual home visitor, Teresa, I should say, she has experienced intimate partner violence, sexual violence that she's had to report. And from that, the culture communed together and questioned Teresa on why she was doing that. So really, she felt a little bit implicated by this group, but she had to explain her mandated reporter role. It was for their safety. And in bringing that up, we pulled in Willimantic Police Department to utilize their bilingual police officer to help educate the families in the community, and also form an advisory board to pull in other organizations so that collectively we can address the community, again, to empower and educate these families. What are we doing for safety? We've had self-defense classes, narcotics training recently by the Plainfield Police. Putnam Police did situational awareness, de-escalation training. And we use a device called a birdie alarm that the home visitor will wear on their lanyard to pull, that will sound an alarm. So those are some of the things. Also, our home visiting, again, it's free, voluntary, and we're a prevention program. So again, it can spill over to crisis, where we can opt to do virtual visits. We can meet at a home, library, or park. And we ask if anyone else is in the home each and every time the home visitor will do a visit. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra and Deanna. Representative Vahey or Senator Anwar, did you have anything to add before?
No, thanks, Sasha. All set.
Thank you. So CHA and DPH, I think we'll have to move to the next meeting. That way we can have adequate time to hear your presentation.
And Sasa, we're still waiting on DCF was hopefully the next time, and DSS. So we still have some coordinating of that, but we need to really start working on coming up with some recommendations. Our timeline is on or before January 1st. Hopefully we can stay on time with that, but if we back it up to, we're already at the end of October, so it doesn't give us a long time to really start coming up with some reasonable recommendations. And I have to say, after today's meeting, my eyes are wide open. I really appreciate everybody that presented. You educated me. I really had no idea how some of the programs were run, and I truly appreciate the sharing of information. And I think, you know, we certainly can use the experts on this group to help us come up with some reasonable recommendations that I hope are accessible and, you know, timely for us, so that we can really provide the services in the community that we need to in the time that we need to, versus any kind of delays because we can't access information to guide us to any, you know, potential volatile or risk situations. So thank you to everybody. We didn't really talk about next meeting, but it is Veterans Day is the Monday. I know we've been moving constantly to Tuesdays. I do appreciate everybody moving today's to Tuesday because yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of Joyce Grayson's murder. And we did have some events that we needed to go to, and also obviously pay tribute to Joyce. But the next 2 weeks, Veterans Day is that Monday, so Tuesday the 12th, if that works for everybody, the 2:30 to 4:30. And I don't know if maybe we want to move it to Tuesdays from here on through, because that's where it's been. It seems like we've been meeting more on Tuesdays than Mondays. I don't know what people want to do.
Thanks, Tracy. And I guess we can take a survey behind with Peter also. And I just wanted to really say thank you to all the community partner representatives and everyone else who spoke today. And, I hope as we move forward towards a discussion of solutions, we look at equitable solutions to ensure that all people in the state who need care at home and in the community can get it, that we look at the training of our nurses, especially those providing behavioral health service, or all home care providers in the home, what kind of behavioral health training and other trainings we might need. And just thank you all. And I think we should also add the Department of Transportation to our next meeting, because a lot of the issues that we face also include ticketing, parking bans, and other issues in the community being towed and such. So I thank you all. And yeah, I look forward to the next meeting. Anyone else? Okay. I think it's safe to say we're adjourning.
Thank you, everyone.